BBC South West.
So, Peter, very good evening to you.
Good evening.
It seems to me that perhaps the industry, going back a few decades, may have misread the situation and not appreciated that, well, we're going to live that little bit longer now.
I think that's quite true. I think it's not just the industry, but perhaps the public at large, because we haven't appreciated the fact that people are living so much longer into retirement and seen how each different generation wants a different style of retirement than the one before, certainly higher standards of living.
And as they used to say in radio terms back in the days of two-way family favourites, we've got a bumper bundle this week, and that's what we've got now with retirement, because we've got the post-war baby boomers all now reaching retirement age, haven't we?
We have indeed, and some of whom have made good provision for retirement, some haven't, and certainly in my day job as an advisor, speaking to people who have found themselves at the door of retirement and haven't put aside enough provision, and also been told, and don't forget, you're going to live that much longer, therefore your money's got to last even longer than you'd perhaps thought before, then there's real concerns all round.
Indeed, there does seem to be quite a big divide, because many people, as you say, may have made private provision. Many people have been fortunate enough, perhaps, to be in jobs that provided a very good pension deal that went with the job. Others, sadly, missed out on that side of it altogether.
Yeah, this is the demise of the final salary pension scheme, which, yes, you're quite right. There was historically a fair chunk of the population who were fortunate enough to have a pension through work, and if it was a final salary scheme, a good one as well. But of course, they're in decline now, and in fact, very few still exist. And anyone entering the world of work now and understanding what packages their employer provides for them is often going to find a pension missing.
So for those who in the next 12 months or so are going to hit that retirement age, if they haven't sadly made that provision, they've missed the boat. There's very little they can do about that now, is there?
Not necessarily. Yes, it's all very well being wise after the event, but we've got to take stock of what's ahead. And more than ever, there's a need to take advice and to plan retirement seriously, because a lot of decisions that people make when entering into retirement are irreversible decisions. So how to structure the income from their pension pot, if you like. And therefore, there's a greater need than ever before to take advice and really consider the options carefully. And that's where, certainly from an advisor's point of view, we want to see a broader range of products available, so people aren't just forced to face one or two options and hope they've made the right decision.
Now, let's just take a look at those who perhaps have hit 60 or so this year. They could have 5 years, and in fact, with the change of law now, as it were, they could well have another 10 years or so, because we are all being encouraged, and in fact, we're being told we've got to work longer now. So there is still time in that aspect for some to make some provision, isn't there?
Yes, but even then, they still need to take advice about what you're going to do, because putting more money into a pension pot when you've got 5 years to go isn't going to make a huge difference. So generally, it comes back to the original discipline of all savings is good, as long as you try and create as much wealth as you can. And often the important decisions about what to do with the money, what product to buy and how to structure it are actually when you're on the door of retirement. I'm about to retire. I've amassed various different pots of money, different assets, different pension pots from perhaps previous employers. What do I do with it now? Because a lot of the options that are presented to people at retirement aren't always that clear. It's not always made obvious that there is more things to consider than just what that particular company is presenting you with.
So, in fact, what options are there, Peter? You're saying there's a number of options there. Can we very briefly just run through some of those options?
Yeah, well, the traditional route would be an annuity. So you've got a pension pot, be it through a company, be it through private means, and you can buy an annuity with that. An annuity is simply an income for life, but within that you've got to make the decision about, do I allow for inflation? Do I allow for provision for my spouse? A proportion carries on in the event of my death. All of these things affect the income that you get. Annuity rates are at an all-time low, so that isn't always the most attractive option for people. Sometimes ISAs are more appropriate because the tax-free element within ISAs is very appealing, and greater flexibility within that. Sometimes people may have decided to invest in a second property to produce an income there, but that's a very illiquid asset, so that also comes with problems. But the missing gap for me has always been something which is, as we've learned, very prevalent overseas in the US and other places, that has an element of a guarantee within it, where you can guarantee a proportion of the capital or guarantee a proportion of the income. And once you blend that in within the other options which we've just mentioned, then you're kind of getting the full package there.
So what would that be called, in other words, if somebody wanted to take that option?
It's often referred to across the industry as a third-way product because it sits between the traditional routes. But it's basically a mechanism where a proportion of capital can be guaranteed or income can be guaranteed and be stepped up with growth within the investment. So you'll pay a premium for that guarantee, but it also provides a lot of flexibility. So capital can be accessed in the future if needs be, and you don't get that within traditional annuities. Mm-hmm. So unit-linked third-way products with guarantees, anything that kind of terminology gets you close because there are a number of providers offering these kind of solutions.
Tell me, has it within the industry been difficult to try and get this message across to people? Because we know pensions have not been performing very well now for the last few years. So I suppose a lot of people are going to be very reluctant to consider putting any more money towards them, aren't they?
Well, let's face it, pensions isn't a very sexy subject, is it? And, another reason why it's easy to put it off. And anyone who's at retirement's door and then having to make decisions suddenly wishes they'd taken these planning aspects a lot seriously a lot earlier on. So hopefully we can learn from previous generations, and if we look at generations above us who are facing retirement, into retirement, and all the challenges that they face with wanting a better quality of living and knowing they're going to have to make their money stretch further, hopefully that will make people take it a lot more seriously. But you're right, there is a need for better education. I, for one, would love to see more education of this in schools, but I think one of the immediate improvements will be workplace pensions, which has already come into place, where employers are going to have to provide a pension for people, and that is a way of forcing people to pay attention to it.
Indeed, I was going to say, I mean, it is on the cards that that's going to be mandatory, isn't it?
It is. It'll start off gradually, large employers first, and smaller contributions going in from an employer and employee, building up to a much larger contribution over time.
Now, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom here, but I suppose another problem is that those now coming up towards the age of retirement, we know that our disposable incomes have been dropping in recent years. Our assets have been dropping generally in recent years, so we've been dipping in, haven't we, to those savings?
We certainly have, and I know from regular day-to-day experience of talking to clients in that age group who have got children trying to get through education, get on the property ladder, and you're quite right that money that was earmarked for future retirement provision is having to be used to help out younger generations. So that's a problem. But what I would encourage people to do that are facing retirement is to not be too concerned about replacing their income as such, more to turn it on its head and say, what do I actually need to achieve as a standard of living? What are my outgoings? So complete a budget planner, look at actually what you need to produce as an income, and then look at how that can be made up from various different sources. And often that is quite reassuring, because for a lot of people, hopefully, then the situation is not quite as bad, but it does certainly mean they need to get advice about how to structure that, because, as I say, a lot of decisions made at that time are irreversible decisions.
And tell me, Peter, within the industry, have you noticed that people are tending now to perhaps not retire at 65 and to work on for a few extra years?
Absolutely. Excuse me. Absolutely. It's not just a case of extending the retirement, it's perhaps phasing into retirement. And years ago, we would see people work for sometimes the same company all their life, know exactly when they were going to retire, know exactly what kind of pension they were going to get, and just accept that was their lot. But nowadays we want a different style of retirement, and certainly in our experience we're seeing people perhaps begin to phase down from maybe 65, maybe, as you say, get a part-time job and keep going a bit longer. So there's an awful lot more flexibility is needed than ever before.
Well, I know we've just scratched the surface there. There's a lot more we could talk about, but sadly we haven't got the time today. But I assume those now approaching that sort of situation, they can go on the internet, they can get more, can they?
They certainly can. I mean, the retirement report which came out from Aegon is full of useful information, and I would encourage people to go to aegon.ie for more information about that, or certainly is a good source of these types of third-way products. Or if someone needs to seek advice from a financial advisor, if they don't have one, then they can find a local IFA at unbiased.co.uk. One thing I would like to add to that, though, I'd encourage anybody who's getting advice to get a second opinion. Never be afraid to get a second opinion for two reasons. Firstly, because the advice that's being given may be a little bit narrow. Not everybody is aware of the full range of products. And secondly, because anyone who's giving financial advice should be happy for that and confident indeed for that to be held up to scrutiny.
So the old adage, it seems, comes into play here. Shop around, really.
Absolutely. Shop around and get second opinions.
Well, some sound advice there, Peter. It's been a pleasure having you on the programme. Thanks ever so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks now. Bye.